Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daiche. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daiche. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Damodarati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Vrindavipineshe. Damodara Rati Vardhana Veshe Hari Nishkuta Vrindavipineshe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Vrishabhanudadhi Navashashi Leke Lalita Shaki Guna Ramita Vishakhe. Vrishabhanudadhi Navashashi Leke Lalita Shaki Guna Ramita Vishakhe. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Karunang Gurumai Korona Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite. Karunang Kurumai Karuna Bharite Sanaka Sanatana Varnita Charite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Gokula Taruni Mandala Mahite. Radhe 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 Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Daite. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarane. Om Ajnana Timurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare O Radha, beloved of Lord Madhava, O you who are worshipped by all the young girls of Gokula, all glories unto you, all glories unto you. O Radha, you dress yourself in such a way as to increase Lord Damodara's love and attachment for you. O Queen of Vrindavan, which is the pleasure grove of Lord Hari. O new moon, who has arisen from the ocean of King Vrishabhanu. You are the friend of Lalita, and you make Vishaka loyal to you due to your wonderful qualities of friendliness, kindness, and faithfulness to Krishna. O you who are filled with compassion, O you whose divine characteristics are described by the great sages Sanaka and Sanatan. O Srimati Radharani, please be merciful to me. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 3, entitled by Prabhupada, Karma Yoga. First section, verses 1 through 3. Arjuna questions Krishna. Arjuna uvacha jayasi chet karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat king karmani gore mang niyojayasi Keshava. Arjuna said, O Janardan, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Vyamishrene vavakyena buddhing mohayasiva me tad ekang vada nishchitya yena sreyoham apnuyam. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be more beneficial for me. So equivocal means it seems to Arjuna that Krishna is saying two contradictory things at the same time. That's what equivocal means. It's two things which are contradictory coming out of the same person. Sri Bhagavan uvacha lokesmin vidanishta pura prokta mayanakha jnana yogena sankyanam karma yogena yoginam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Nakarmanam anaramban naishkarmyam purushoshnute nacha tasasanad eva siddhing samadhi gacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tishtyat yakarma krit karyate hi yavashak karma sarva prakritir jai gunai. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities one has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Karmendriyani sanyamya ya aste manasas maran indriyartan vimudhatma mitya achar sa uchate. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes oneself and is called a pretender. Yastu indriyani manasa niyam yarabhaterjuna karmendriya karma yogam asakta sa vishishyate. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, such a person is by far superior. Niyatang kuru karmatvang karmajayo hiya karmana sharira yatra pichate na prasidyet akarmanaha. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. So, Arjuna's misunderstanding at the beginning of this chapter stemmed from the previous chapter. So Arjuna was thinking, so should I not act at all, or should I act? That was his dilemma, because he was confused by what Krishna had said in chapter 2. He didn't know if he should fight or not fight. So here, as the big verse here is verse number 7. If a sincere person, sincere means you actually want spiritual attainment, that you actually want to go back home, back to Godhead, then you have to control the senses by means of the mind. We've given the example before. The senses are like wild horses, but what controls a horse is the reins and the bridle. So that's the mind. The mind has to control the senses. The eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin. Those are the knowledge acquiring senses. So the mind has to control these. Not that the senses dictate to the mind and the mind automatically follows. That is what we call an uncontrolled person. A controlled person, his or her mind controls the senses. But not only that, you begin karma yoga in Krishna consciousness, meaning all of your actions are done as an offering to Krishna. That's the other side. Yes, you control your senses, but then you have to use your senses to serve Krishna. That is what we mean by karma yoga. Acting, yes, you have to act, as Krishna also said in this first section. No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Even while you're sleeping, your external senses are inactive, but the mind is still active while you are sleeping. So, the senses have to be engaged in service to Krishna, and then without attachment. You're not attached to the results are up to Krishna, and also you don't think that the results of my activities are all mine, for me only. No, we can take prasad, but not that everything is my property. That's the superior person. And then Krishna said, perform your prescribed duty. So this is applicable because keep in mind, whatever Krishna is saying here in Bhagavad Gita is also meant for all the devotees. Krishna is not just speaking just to Arjuna. Arjuna is the target. What Krishna is saying is applicable to everyone. And how that is applicable, that's explained by the spiritual master. That's why we also study Prabhupada's purports to the verses, so that we get the correct understanding how it can be applied in my life. Perform your prescribed duties. So we all have prescribed duties. As a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, and even children have prescribed duties. But I don't see many children today for some reason. But the children's prescribed duties, obey the parents. Oh, I see Jairam's child is there. So yes, obey the parents. That is the child's prescribed duty. Now we go to the next section. This section, verses 9 through 16, is called the cycle of sacrifice. This next verse is very famous verse of Gita. Yagyartar karmanon yatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha tar artang karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. I decided to start including the Sanskrit because the Sanskrit is purifying. Not only is Sanskrit itself a purifying language, but this is Bhagavan Uvacha. So how much more purifying it is to hear the sound vibration of the shlokas. It's also good for me. It gives me inspiration when I recite these shlokas. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. That is karma yoga. You work, and it's done as an offering, as a sacrifice for Vishnu, the maintainer, the Supreme Lord, the one who's in your heart. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duty for Vishnu's satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. The non-devotees, what do? They also work, but they do it for their own satisfaction and pleasure. They don't care about God. But a devotee is different. The devotee thinks, I'm going to do this activity and do it in such a way that it's pleasing to God. But how will you know that? How will you know which actions are pleasing to God? Therefore, we have the three things: Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Bhagavad Gita is the best Shastra. Simple, easy, complete. After all, it's called Gita Upanishad. Prabhupada writes in his introduction to Gita, one book suffices. You learn Bhagavad Gita nicely, you'll know everything you need how to be successful in this life. One book. I'm so glad Sri started with Gita. Wise decision. Yes. Because if you don't learn Bhagavad Gita, forget about Bhagavatam and other things. You won't understand it. Bhagavad Gita is the basis of all preaching. If you study Prabhupada's lectures, time after time after time, he's simply quoting Bhagavad Gita. It is the foundation. You have to know this Bhagavad Gita. So we know what is satisfaction to Vishnu through the Gita, through the spiritual master, and through other advanced devotees who lived in the past and who live at present. With these three things, then you know how to act for Vishnu's satisfaction. It's not a question of what I think or what you think. That's called sentimentality. No, it's a science. That's another thing Prabhupada preaches. The science of Bhagavad Gita. So these three things, Shastra, Gita, Guru, and Sadhu, saintly person. And in this way, you will always remain free from bondage. Sahayagya prajasristva purovacha prajapatihi anena prasabhishyadvam eshavoshrishta kamaduk. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this sacrifice, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. So yes, being a devotee means you should live a happy life as a human being. And at the same time, at the end, you will achieve liberation. You will go back to Godhead. Now in the Vedas, there are so many yagyas or sacrifices. But we are living in the age of Kali. Only one sacrifice is recommended. I will quote the verse, Yagyai Sankirtana Prayayar Yajanti Hi Sumedasa. Sumedasa means intelligent person. So in Kali Yuga, the only yagya or sacrifice recommended is Sankirtan, Krishna Sankirtan. What we are doing right now is Krishna Sankirtan. Some Kirtan, complete Kirtan means glorification. It has many neat meanings. Glorification, it means singing, chanting, describing. So, the recommended sacrifice in the age of Kali is to always talk about Krishna, always sing about Krishna, like that. Always describing Krishna. If you do that, you will be happy in this life. As you can see, look at me. Big belly means happy. And if we go on with this chanting, we will go back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada said, if you follow these principles, you will go back home, back to Godhead in this lifetime. Hari Bol. A few years as a nice, simple devotee. You see the picture behind me? That's where you're going. Just have to be a good devotee. Devan bhavayatanena te deva bhavayantuva parasparang bhavayanta sreya parang avapsyata. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you. And thus by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. So people ask that question. Hey, in your Hare Krishna temple, you don't have any devatas. I only see Radha, Krishna, Jagannath. I don't see Ganesh, Surya. I don't see Hanuman. I don't see Shiva. You guys are not worshiping demigods. Yes. Why? Here's the reason. When you water the root of the tree, all the tree is benefited. When you put food in the mouth and it goes to the stomach, all the limbs of the body are nourished. Similarly, you worship Vishnu or Krishna, all the 33 crores of demigods are satisfied. You don't have to worship each and every single one. After all, you don't have enough time in the day to worship all the demigods. And you heard me say last week, I believe, I said it at some point, Sarva Deva Mayo Guru. Krishna said to Uddhava this line, Sarva Deva Mayo Guru. Within the spiritual master, all the demigods are included. So in ISKCON temples, we have the Prabhupada Murti. So when you do Guru Puja, you are worshiping all the demigods. So we are good to go. You water the root of the tree, because all the demigods are simply symbolic parts and parcels of Krishna's universal form. Chapter 11, we will study the universal form. That's what the demigods are. They're simply parts and parcels of Krishna's universal form. Let's continue. Ishtan Bogan Hibo Deva Dasyante Yagya Bhavita Tairadatan Apradayabhyo Yobungte Stena Evasa. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, will supply all necessities for you. But one who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. So again, we don't eat until it's offered to Krishna. That is the devotee's mentality. First offered to Krishna, then we partake of the prasad. Yagya shistashana santo muchyante sarvakil bishai bunjate te twagang papa ye pachant yatmakarana. This verse is so nice. Listen, the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is first offered for sacrifice. Shrilesh tells me, when you do your food for life, first of all, it is offered. Very nice. Perfecto. Then it becomes prasad. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So it's not a question of being vegan or vegetarian. That's not the question. Long back in 1966, this question was brought up, and Prabhupada confirmed, yes, we're not vegetarian, we are Krishnatarian. We eat food which is first offered to Krishna. Anad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anasambhava yagyad bhavati parjanyo yagya karma samudbhava. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of sacrifice, and sacrifice is born of prescribed duties. Again, I reiterate, this is Kali Yuga. Only one sacrifice is recommended: Sankirtan, hearing and chanting, describing, talking about Krishna. That's it. Karma brahmodbhavam vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarvagatam brahma nityang yagye pratishtatam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Did I not say that this Bhagavad Gita is the essence of all the Vedas? And who's speaking it? Krishna. So this is exactly what this verse is saying. The essence of all the Vedas is Gita. And who's speaking? Krishna. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. That is how you achieve God. You don't make up your own process. That is the problem in the age of Kali. Everybody wants to make up their own process. But just like Kishore, he was on the road. He just entered his house. So when you're driving your car, you cannot say to the police officer, "Oh, I went through that red light because in my book, it's okay to go through the red light." That's not an excuse. You cannot make up your own traffic laws. So similarly, you cannot make up your own religion or codes of morality. It's already stipulated. Our duty is to simply follow. And as I will repeatedly say, as Prabhupada says in his introduction, the best, simplest way to satisfy all your Vedic literature is learn Bhagavad Gita. Evang pravartitang chakrang nanu vartayati ya aghayur indriya ramo mogang partha sajivati. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life this cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. Such a person lives in vain. So that's it. The devotee and non-devotee. The non-devotee does whatever he or she thinks and feels like. The devotee, no. I must act according to how Krishna is speaking in Bhagavad Gita. I'm not free to do anything I want. That's the difference. The non-devotee thinks I can do whatever the hell I want. And the devotee thinks I can do whatever Krishna wants me to do. Next section, verses 17 through 19. The position of a self-realized soul. Yastvatma ratir eva syad atma triptascha manava atmanyeva cha santushtas tasya karam na vidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for such a person there is no other duty. Yes, because the whole purpose of studying the Bhagavad Gita is to come into contact with the soul and the super soul. That's the whole gamut of Bhagavad Gita. The soul coming into contact with Krishna in the heart. Naiva tasya krene narto nakrite neha kashchana nachasya sarva bhuteshu kashchit arata vyapashraya. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Yes, in the beginning, Arjuna did not want to fight because it was not satisfaction to his senses. But Krishna is instructing him throughout Bhagavad Gita, you are to fight this war, this battle of Kurukshetra, for my satisfaction. That's the gist of Bhagavad Gita. Doing everything for Krishna's satisfaction. Tasmad asakta satatang karyam karma samachara asakto hi acharan karma param apnoti purushaha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the supreme. So this is a recurring theme in Bhagavad Gita. You act as a matter of duty, not because I feel like it or don't feel like it. No. I do things because it is my duty. I chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra because it is my duty to chant Hare Krishna. I offer my food to Krishna because it is my duty. I work for Krishna because that is my prescribed duty. I am Krishna's devotee, and therefore I have to act for his satisfaction. That was verse number 9. Do things for the satisfaction of Vishnu. Next two verses, setting the example. Karma naiva hi sangsiddhim astita janakadaya loka sangraham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi. Kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Arjuna will also achieve perfection if he agrees to fight the battle of Kurukshetra. Krishna will point that out in chapter 11. But that is the actual conclusion. Arjuna says, yes, I will act as you have instructed me. Because that's what Krishna wants Arjuna to do. Pick up his weapon and fight. If Arjuna did that, that's his perfection. And yes, that's exactly what happened. Therefore, just for the sake of educating people in general, you should perform your work. So you fathers, you have to set a good example for your children. Otherwise, if you yourselves do not act accordingly, they're going to look at you and say, well, why should I chant? You don't chant. Why should I do my homework when you're staying home just watching TV all day? Why should I do anything you ask me to do when you yourself don't act properly? Yes. It's like I have so much experience. Back when I was a kid, so many parents in America used to smoke, but then they would tell their children, don't smoke. So the children would say, how can you tell me not to smoke? You yourself smoke. Or another thing, in America, people drink all the time alcohol. But then they would tell their children, you don't do this. And the children said, what are you talking about? Why should I listen to you? Practice what you preach. That's Krishna consciousness. We practice what we preach. Yad yad acharati shrestас tat tad evetarojana Sayat pramanam kurute, lokastad anuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So we have so many Mahajans, so many great sadhus, so many avatars. Why do they do what they do? To set the standard. Particularly, we give the example of Lord Ram, the ideal human, the ideal son, the ideal husband, the ideal prince, the ideal warrior. Study the life of Ram, you see how exemplary he was. When his brother and all of Ayodhya begged him, "You come back from the forest," Bharat said, "I will take your place, because everybody wants you to rule Ayodhya." And Ram said, "No, it is my duty. I must execute the duty of Dasharath. It's my duty." Now these next three verses are very important for understanding Krishna when he comes to this material world. This section is called Krishna's obligations. Name partasti kartavyang trishu lokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyang varta eva chakarmani. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems. After all, he's God. He's the lawmaker. Krishna, there's a phrase in the very first verse of Bhagavatam, Abhigya Swarat. Why is Krishna the absolute truth? Abhigya, he's all-knowing, past, present, future. And Swarat, completely independent. No sinful activity can touch Krishna. Why? Because he is completely independent. So there is no work prescribed for me, because Krishna is ever liberated. Nor am I in want of anything. That's true. Krishna is Atma Ram, self-satisfied. He doesn't need anything. Krishna just has to simply think, it manifests. Don't you wish you could be like that? Oh, I would like to have a samosa. Boom! There it is. But I'm not Krishna. I have to go, I have to work, takes a couple of hours, and then I can have a samosa. But Krishna can say, Ladu, there it is. That's why we're not God. If you can do that, then you're God. Otherwise, go to work. Nor have I in need to obtain anything, because whatever Krishna wants is right there with Radharani. I'm sure you all heard so much yesterday about Radharani. Whatever Krishna wants, Radharani supplies. And yet, I am engaged in prescribed duties. Look at that. He doesn't have to, but when Krishna was in Dwaraka, he obeyed all the Vedic rules and regulations. You can read about it in Krishna book. Krishna would get up early in the morning when the rooster crowed, before sunrise. Krishna didn't have to do that. Krishna could have stayed in bed with Rukmini all day long if he wanted to. Who's going to do anything? No. Krishna knew, I have to set the example. So even though Krishna is being embraced by the goddess of fortune, Rukmini herself, when the rooster crowed before sunrise, Krishna would get up, wash his hands and feet, and begin his sadhana, morning spiritual practices. And there was a whole routine Krishna would do every morning in Dwaraka. Krishna was the ideal householder in Dwaraka. Yadihi ahang navarteyang jatu karman yatandrata Mama Vartmanu Vartante, Manushya Partha Sarvasha. So these last two lines will also appear in chapter 4. Mama Vartmanu Vartante, Manushya Parthas. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. When Krishna in Vrindavan, after breakfast, what would Krishna do after breakfast? He would go with his cowherd boys, and they would spend the whole day taking care of the cows and calves. When they were young, they took care of the calves. And then at the age of, I think it's Pauganda, they were able to take care of the cows. And his mother and father used to stay in the morning. Why are you leaving us? We want you to stay. Krishna said, no. How will that look? I have to go and do my prescribed duty. Krishna's only 6, 7 years old, and he's thinking, no, I can't stay home. I have to go and take care of the cows and calves. So that is what is meant. Krishna shows by example. Utsideyor ime loka nakuryang karma ched aham. Sankarasya chakartasyam upahanyam ima praja. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. In other words, if people don't do their prescribed duties, the whole world goes to hell. The whole world runs by people doing their prescribed duties. Next section, verses 25 through 30. The difference between the learned and the ignorant. Sakta karmanya vidvangso yata kurvanti bharata kuryad vidvangs tata shaktas chakirshu loka sangraham. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. So that's why we also act in this world, to show others this is the right way to live. No attachment to the results. Everything is done for Krishna's satisfaction. And by my example, just like Prabhupada, when he started his movement, everything he was telling his disciples to do, he himself was personally doing. Rising early in the morning, chanting japa mala, worshiping the deity, offering his food, giving class, working on his books. Prabhupada did exactly what he asked his disciples to do. That's the Acharya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Na buddhi bedam janayed, agyanam karma sanginam, joshayet sarva karmani, vidvang yukta samachara. So as to not disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, learned person should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. This is how a preacher acts. The preacher inspires others little by little by little by little how they can act in such a way as to gradually develop Krishna consciousness. So that you have to think about. Next verse is a very prominent verse in Gita. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. Ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks oneself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So we discussed this point back in chapter 2. Again, the soul itself is actually not doing anything in the material world. The soul is passive, but the soul is experiencing all the reactions in the material world because it has given power of attorney over to the mind. And it's just like once you get into the taxi or the Uber. Do you have Uber there in Panama? So once you're sitting in the car, you're just a passenger. Yes, you can tell the driver, take me here, take me there. But the driver is doing the work. You are the helpless passenger. So in the same way, the soul has given power of attorney to the driver, namely the mind. And thus, the soul identifies with the particular body and experiences the dream of material existence. That's false ego. I'm man, I'm woman, I'm American, I'm Panamanian, I'm Indian, I'm Hindu, this. No. You're spirit soul, aham brahmasmi. You're not any of these things. But because of false ego, you think, I am man, I am woman, I am boss, I am this, I am that. And whatever is going on is simply the interaction of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Tatvavittu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matva nasajjate. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth does not engage the senses in sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruitive results. Yes, the non-devotee is working. We are also working. But we don't use the senses simply to enjoy the objects of the senses. The non-devotee wants to see beautiful forms. We see the beautiful form of the deity. The non-devotee wants to hear all kinds of fantastic music. We want to hear Krishna bhajan, Krishna kirtan. The non-devotee wants to eat all kinds of abominable things. I'm sure in Panama you have seen people eat the most obnoxious things. I'm sure you've seen it, especially in Cologne. I've seen it in New York when I lived there. People eat can't even talk about it. But we eat Krishna prasad. So we are engaging the senses, but not simply for sense gratification. Sense gratification is there because Krishna reciprocates. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lasted more than one day. You all know I joined the temple because of prasad. That's the famous story. That's why I like to come to Cologne and all the places I used to travel, because of nice prasad. But I'm not living just to enjoy my senses. It has to be offered to Krishna. Prakrite guna samudha sajjante guna karmasu tana Krishna vido mandan Krishna vinna vichalayet. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. See, that's the difference. We become attached to spiritual activities, not material activities. There's a difference. There's spiritual activity and material activities. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these inferior duties are due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Yes, they don't know any better, so there's no need to get agitated. When you see an ignorant person doing so many stupid things, you don't get agitated because you know they're ignorant. But the devotee is compassionate and tries to lift them up. Mayi sarvani karmani sanyas yadyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudyasva vigata jvara. Therefore, so we're coming to another conclusion in this third chapter. Therefore, in other words, Krishna has said so many things, now Krishna is saying, therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me. That's surrender. With full knowledge of me, meaning you know that Krishna is supreme. That's what this verse means here. Full knowledge of Krishna as the Supreme Lord, without desires for profit, and with no claims to proprietorship. Nothing is mine, everything belongs to Krishna. And free from lethargy. Yes, a devotee should not be a lazy son of a gun. Free from lethargy, fight. Look what Krishna... So every so often, Krishna is going to, therefore, fight. Yes. Mahatma Gandhi said, oh, Bhagavad Gita is a book of peace. Well, not for Arjuna, because repeatedly throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is going to say, therefore, fight. What is our fight? Our fight is fight against ignorance, fight against gross materialism, fight against the evil things of this Kali Yuga, fight against injustice, fight for morality, fight to preach Krishna consciousness. We have time for, oh no, looks like we'll have to finish the rest of this chapter next week. It's not always possible to finish the chapter in one session if you want it within an hour. So we'll have to pick this up where we left off. Let's do a little chanting, and then we'll have time for questions. I'm fired up. This was fantastic. This is for all the intelligent devotees of Cologne. Namaste Narasimhaya Praklada Klada Dayane Hiranya Kashipur Bhaksha Shilatankanakalaye Hito Nrsinga Parato Nrsinga Yato Yato Yamita To Nrsinga Bahir Nrsinga Hridaye Nrsinga Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye Nrsinghamadim Sharanam Prapadye Tavakara Kamala Varenakam Adbhuta Sringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringam Keshavadrita Naradi Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jai Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.